Welcome to Hospitality Folks, a podcast about the people behind great hospitality. I'm your host, Alicia Dick Wahlberg. Join me as we talk with hotel teams, managers, and operators about hiring, culture, and what it really takes to build teams that perform at high levels and stay. Welcome back to another episode of Hospitality Folks. I'm your host, Alicia Dick Wahlberg, and I am so excited to introduce a very special guest today.
Alicia, you humble me. It's great to be joining your communication, your podcast. My name is Daryl Kornelsen, based here in Frankfurt, Germany. We got to know each other through, I thought, a very healthy, positive, and introductory interaction in LinkedIn. That being said, post our interaction, if any of your viewers or participants would keen to stay in touch, gladly through my LinkedIn.
When we started interacting, what I saw was you were also an immigrant from over the pond, slightly different area, but also now living in Germany for many years. And I realized we had quite a few things in common. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about your experience moving from Canada to Germany and what sparked that transition for you.
Well, thank you, Alicia. And you're correct. We did have an online connection, and it's led to interaction the last couple of weeks around a couple of topics that connect us. So thank you for that initial connection and the opportunity today. The post that you're mentioning was one of those glowing alpine Western Canadian scenes. And I was looking at it over weeks, and I was thinking to myself, you don't see the smiles in this picture. You don't see the warmth, those human engagements. And following some of your posts, I felt really compelled or motivated to share that, because that's something almost like a torch. You can hear me missing the Winter Olympics in Cortina already. So it was that torch carrying with from my homeland of Canada, where there's that heartfelt friendliness that people always return back from Canada and they'll say, we saw some great things, but we really had some great moments. And I think that's that engagement around moments that I still carry with me. And I look in every day. With my profession of choice, which is hospitality, but also the value of those micro human moments.
We've talked a lot about human moments. And one thing that really sparked my interest the last time that we were talking was the we versus the guest journey or the customer journey. And you've been a part of some really amazing teams. Could you maybe share what did success look like inside of those teams and how cultural played a big part in that?
Well, the way you ramp up the question, thank you. Firstly, I'll never forget when I was starting my first job in the industry in Munich, which interestingly in a glamorous department called stewarding, but when you receive your blaue Kittel, it's actually dishwashing. And when I walked down the Maximilianstraße approaching the Vier Jahreszeiten Kempinski, Munich, I actually felt compelled to change the side of the street. It was so humbling. And at that time, perhaps we're speaking a little bit of old school, but that feeling of joining something bigger, something that had legacy was, I guess, driven by, in one word, curiosity, fascination. And maybe just, if you will allow me a follow-up observation, I think that's one of the things that draws guests to these brands and properties and destinations primarily of experience, because we really wonder how teams pull these things together every day. And every day really reminds that it is a daily business. It's a lot of hands pulling together special moments through inspired energy.
Could you maybe share a moment when you remember a team handling, whether it's a win or a setback, and how you experience that in the culture that you are working in?
When a hotel is opened, I'm going to say this very abstract, but it only really opens once. That being said, there are hotels that close and reopen under different brands. But that feeling of coming to a building, a property with a history or not, and emotionalizing that building. It's really driven by visions on so many different levels. It can be from the stakeholder owner. It could be also the storytelling that the property intrinsically carries with it. And I think that fascination of joining and contributing, I might use the metaphor of an orchestra, where you can obviously hear the harmony, but the question is, how do you align the soloists to feel compelled to join that greater harmony? And that's really, I think, one of the most exciting things of deciding for an opening is you really become a part of a legacy. You don't perhaps recognize it at the time because the days are so long. And also the team sometimes don't know what they're getting into. It just has a tremendous momentum of its own.
Now, you've become a leader and a mentor, and you mentioned there's this phrase, es muss sich
Yeah.
lohnen. It has to be worth it. One from the business side, but also from the team side. Maybe you could talk about for those listening that don't really know what this phrase really means in a hospitality setting or in a different language. Maybe you could explain that a little bit.
I once had a leader in my life. I was fortunate. She shared with me the concept of Pareto. And the moment she pronounced it, I realized I'm going to have to learn what she's saying. The metaphor, you can see all the trees, but you don't recognize the forest. That really is a thing. And when we go back to your observation, I think that's just a tremendous part of our day to day when we look at Pareto, which 20% of our resources enable us for 80% of our result. We're reminded sometimes that we're really distracted by things that might draw our resources, be them internal or external, and finding a moment to catch a breath, to take a step back and recognize, hang on a second, am I allocating my resources? Am I feeling accountable, which the task that the company has given me, and been able to contribute to that 80% of the resource? It's sometimes the guest journey, it's sometimes the customer journey in that sense, but it should also be my journey as a participant of making those moments possible.
I love that messaging, especially for you as someone who is very much into being a mentor and in these leadership roles. I think it's important to also remember that your team needs to manage what resources they're putting, what energy, and it's not infinite. There is a limit on every side. Now, part of that, I've had a lot of questions as an immigrant in Europe from North America. If you were
Right,
to maybe mentor someone who wants to go from Canada to Europe or vice versa, what
right.
is something that you would tell them that they should be prepared that especially when it comes to managing their resources?
Well, you're asking a very large question, so
Yes.
let me decide how granular we should get. I know every day that my German is still improving, even after decades. That being said, I'm not a musician, but having a musical ear or a fascination for language and dialects is actually almost a key that ends up opening the nuances of the culture. Things end up being unfolded around you that you didn't really see coming. And I think that's the magical journey of travel. I wrote down the word because it fascinates me. If we looked away from Canada for a moment, if we looked at one of our favorite destinations, the islands and the mainland of Greece, one speaks of philoxenia. And that really is treating strangers as friends. It's their definition of tourism. I think that general curiosity and fascination, why are things in this very special way? And it takes you on a journey. You almost get hooked. And people speak of the travel bug, but I see that in a positive way. The more you look, the more open you are, actually, the more gifts you receive. And that's perhaps, maybe just in closing, Alicia, one of the greatest gifts of travel, but also being a host, is that the more you give as a host, you'll be surprised that you end up getting more back. And that really is the generosity and the reward of being a hospitality provider.
I think to be successful in hospitality, you have to like people.
Yeah. Um, you know, it's interesting that you say that. And there's also that phrase, good begets good. That's really starting off on the right foot. And also finding a way to start your day, or if you're in the evening shift, start your shift, really being aligned with the vision, expectations, the mission, but also being the best you can be. And when you ask the question of mentoring, what does mentoring really be in that context? We really come to the workplace as human beings first. And I think that's the most important message being said. And if I could just allow myself a follow-up observation, so watching the news this morning, the CEO of Allianz in Munich was saying the human factor is becoming more and more important these days because people have an intrinsic mistrust of technology. That being said, we know that's only partially true, but it's reminding us as things get more and more digital, how more and more important the human interaction is.
That's exactly what we're trying to solve at Folks Nest. So I fully agree with that. Maybe we can step a step back. So, for those who don't know you, what does leadership and mentorship look like for you when you are working with teams and individuals?
Well, I have to be conscious of the two hats I wear. One is over my business commercial acumen head, and one is, of course, the one that comes from my heart. And um, let's just say giving both of those horses in front of the coach a bit of a tamed bridling. On the one side, you know, coming from Canada, North America, or cultures that are equally inspired, our enthusiasm can often in mentoring be deemed as cheerleading. And that's something one, in this context myself, I have to be conscious of, is that mentoring always begins with open, wholehearted interest. One to one, where does someone come from? What are they carrying with them? What's important to them? Perhaps what they're struggling with. That H2H factor. That being said, we're coming together often in these cases on a business remit. So it comes down to sometimes what are you struggling with, but also what are your successes? And then I'm just going to complete that little circle because I know it's something that we smiled about earlier. The concept of celebrating success is celebrated differently in different cultures or different regions. And I think, remember once sharing that volleyball analogy. We know we're not going to win every ball that comes over the net, but even the one that lands on the floor between us, we'll still smile at each other and say, let's work together as a team. The next one will get. There'll always be one ball that gets away. Just we have to stay true to the course.
After we talked, I actually did my first volleyball game that same night. And I, as this American walking into this rural German volleyball club, someone did something and it missed it. And I was like, hey, good job. It's okay. And they all looked at me like I was insane. Like, what are
Yeah,
you doing? I'm like,
yeah.
we'll get the next one, guys. What do you mean?
We'll get the next one. We really will. And it really made my heart smile the way you shared pursuant as we followed up after our first couple of contacts. The you were going up there and falling into that volleyball analogy. I mean, this type of year, it could be anything. It could have been darts,
Yeah.
but in this context, it was a true team sport. So it really gave me goosebumps looking back. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am talking with people stepping into the hospitality careers almost daily. And I'm talking at the other
Yeah.
side with people who are leading hospitality all over Europe and North America right now. And one thing I've kind of started to pull apart is maybe the older generation. When I ask them, how did you get going in your career? And they all talk about having this mentor who was a huge stepping stone for them to get pushed into a lifelong career, where when I talk with the younger generation, they don't have those mentors. It's very apparent. And so it's so clear for me. I have this idea that if we were able to bring more of a mentorship back into hospitality, and there is some people out there and they're amazing. They're just doing it quietly for small teams. I'm almost wondering, when did you realize you had become a mentor to others?
You're looking back makes more sense when you see the milestones in your rearview mirror. It's not always easy to look back when you're trying to maneuver the next corner ahead. But there were certain times where I felt it was good in a mentoring moment to have a walk around a block. Sometimes the block is the physical property of the hotel, but really take the person out of the situation instead of just focusing on taking the situation out of the person. And even perhaps secondarily, as a follow-up observation, Alicia, um, there's that phenomenon out there that our health is improved by taking 10,000 steps a day. There's also a Goldman Sachs study out there saying spend 2 hours out under the fresh air or in the fresh air. When you speak of people that are fascinated by the industry and they're looking for their on-ramp into the business, one thing that we're engaged with on the communication level these days is a high frequency of virtual meetings, of online presence, and digital calendars. There was a time, let's just say pre-pandemic, where a check-in was actually going for a coffee together, or it was perhaps sitting down in one of the hotel restaurants between shifts and just having an open moment. And I think it's really important to decide for a culture, but also decide for a leader that when she or he says, I'm interested in working together, the question is, on what basis are we going to be successful together? I still love the question that people ask themselves when deciding for a role. Is this a culture that I can be successful in?
If a hospitality team truly wants long term success, what must feel emotionally safe inside that environment?
Well, when you say emotionally safe, then the answer, of course, also touches an emotional note to it. We speak these days of awareness, mindfulness. These are all cognitive aspects of an approach to a place of work. On the one side, the rules of engagement are sometimes covered in an SOP, in KPIs, in certain things that we agree to in a business. That being said, there's some things that we, or you might have challenges completing or exceeding with your own resources. I think the other thing, that being said, is you might discover something in yourself. And I think that's the fascination in our business is they are mentors, leaders, inspired individuals. And if we look around where I'm based today in the German landscape, we are truly blessed with tremendous mentors and leaders. Um, I don't know if it's ever been at this level before, but really understanding that empathy, mindfulness, mental health, and well being is an integral part of the success story. And even as we reflect back, there was a time where taking time back in food and beverage, rooms division was almost one of those things that everyone really talked about. Today, proactively being focused, fit, healthy, and positive is really important because in the end of the day, the greatest asset we have is being able to unleash resources that we didn't even know we had in ourselves. Surprise and delight and enthusiasm is actually something that's included in the price. And I think that's the best way to have a closer look at it.
I feel like, from my standpoint, it also just listening to your team as individuals and as a group. They will tell you what they need if you ask them.
They will, and I can remember um, a very special situation where we as a department invited hotel operations to a town hall, and team members had a brief introduction who they are, what they were doing in sales, marketing, PR, revenue reservations, saying, this is what I'm up against. This is where I see working with you. And one of the greatest gifts when I look back is there was one person, I'm not going to mention her name today, but perhaps she'll see and hear this message and know I'm speaking of her. She went up on the stage in front of chefs and dishwashers and doormen and management colleagues, and she literally told why the interaction, the teamwork, the goals and the objectives, how we were going to accomplish it together, what she's leading, where she's struggling, but also where she sees success and opportunities looking forward in teamwork. I still look back and thought, what a great idea to have this town hall and have this engagement. And the most important thing is it didn't take too long because everybody had something else to do.
Yeah, it has to be punctual.
Has to be punctual. And there's nothing wrong with being 5 minutes early.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
So before we close, I just want to step back a little bit and let all these topics that we went through breathe a bit. If someone is listening and wanted to sit with this conversation later today, is there a song that you would suggest that they play as they reflect?
Well, you're asking someone who's been working as a salesperson for a long time to answer a question. I think, Alicia, my first answer is going to be along the lines of sensory selling, which was very dear to me when I worked proudly and humbly for Taj Resorts, hotels, and palaces. Um, and sensory selling is such an important thing, triggering moments, creating experiences. And to answer your question, it was in the 80s that Journey came out with a song called Don't Stop Believing. Uh, probably lost track of the song over a long time until Eric Chase, the Contour Deep version, came out. And Don't Stop Believing, if you have a closer look at the text and why he wrote the song or they wrote the song, I think it's a great message. And as the days are getting longer, it's something that we can all go back to. And it gives a lot of momentum in times where we're wondering, where do we get the next push from? And Don't Stop Believing from Journey would be my answer.
I think that's a beautiful way to really just believe in yourself and make that dream happen.
Well, I think music critics look back at that song, and in two words, um, it was described as celebrating resilience. And
Mhm.
that's probably one of the messages that's well left with the questions you brought me today.
Wonderful. And if anyone enjoyed this conversation and wants to find Daryl later on, follow up with him. We will leave his Instagram and his LinkedIn contacts in the descriptions below. If you found this episode helpful, follow and subscribe to Hospitality Folks and share this episode with your team.